Greetings and salutations, and welcome to episode 171 of Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner. No Trev tonight. He's taking care of some family business as one of his littles has soccer game tonight. So we wish her the best of luck and moving through those motions. I coach soccer, so I know how exciting it can be for the little ones. Busy time here for Ref the District. Lots of things going on behind the scenes, but lots of things to talk about as well with the Washington Commanders here as we stream live every Wednesday night at 7:30 Eastern here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We also put this on your favorite audio platforms afterwards. So wherever you are, make sure you come over to YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on audio, leave us a rating and review. Washington is moving along with a lot of their signings and all the things that they're trying to put together. Now, the thing is if you head over to Bet Online, they still only have like an 18% chance to make the playoffs. So maybe not as good as we Washington fans would like, but it's still pretty early. OTA is going to be happening next week. We'll be bringing Commanders updates as there's information available and worthy of its own content. All that good stuff's going to go. But if you wanted to head out to Bet Online and put some money down on Washington, it looks like it's pretty good odds that you won't make money, but you might make a big buck if Washington does get to the playoffs. So you can go to Bet Online, use the code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get yourself a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Maybe you don't like betting, for your Washington Commanders. Maybe you need a little emotional hedge bet somewhere other places. Maybe you don't like Joel Embiid and you want to bet against him and get the 76ers out so Harris can focus on the Commanders. All that is going to be right at your fingertips at Bet Online. NBA action, NHL action, baseball, the Nats. I feel like they're looking good and they play fun baseball, even if they, lose a game, 7-1 like they have just recently. But you can bet on the Nats. You can bet on golf. It's all right there at your fingertips. All of your up-to-date wagering and sporting news. Just use that code BELIEVE, BLEAV, to get yourself a welcome bonus, 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts. Now that I've got some of that housekeeping out of the way, let's say good evening to our wonderful folks here in the chat who are going to be filling the void, I believe, of Trev, although he will never be filled in our hearts. We do have a lot of people in here already. Locked On Law, JG, Roger in the house, Uptown Dre, Brian is here, Kevin is in here as well, Doug, TJ, we have Gus Bus, of course, Jake is here, and it's going to be a good show, I think, because we're going to be talking about, I know we're going to be nitpicking a little bit on some of the picks and lack of picks that Washington made when we get to the draft. And oh my goodness, Stoner, you let me get through almost the entire thing. And we haven't even mentioned that Hack City's Joe DeLeon will be on tonight. So he'll be helping us break down the NFL draft here, more specifically Washington's draft and where he feels these pieces will go. He is the Believe Network's premier college and NFL draft analyst, and you can catch him over at his own channel at Hack City Football. And by the way, he also happened to be Rhode Island long snapper. I don't know if he's in the business though. We'll have to see if he's in football shape. Maybe Washington could use him. We'll talk to Joe there during the game, which we'll be talking about Adam Peters' first draft. In the cool down, we're going to be talking about the updated roster, where we feel there might still be some holes for Washington kind of fill. Where are the battles going to be as they head into training camp? Are there any names that we should be looking out for as far as, hey, this person is kind of doing a lot better? Is there any people who might be on the bubble? You had a couple late round pass rushers like Andre Jones who might be edged out by Jean Baptiste, who was the Adam Peters signing. So you never know. We'll be talking about all that stuff as well here in the warm-up. Stoner, you've ranted about this a couple of times, and we're going to give you some more time to rant, and we'll see what our audience has to say about this as well. And that is the lack of addressing offensive tackle during the offseason. So that's going to be the topic here for this. Now, Stoner, before we let you get onto your rant here, had we heard any information on if Washington was pursuing a guy and that guy just signed elsewhere. Because I was racking my brain and I was trying to think, and I was like, I don't think anything. And now one of the things we've praised this front office for is how they're pretty tight-lipped, and we haven't got these kind of and everything. But sometimes you'll hear mumblings of, hey, this person signed with Philadelphia. Washington was also in the mix. In this particular aspect, it's not Washington. And I want to mention that one because that was Becton, formerly of the Jets, signed with the Philadelphia Eagles. Once we didn't draft one in the first 2 rounds, people started looking for who's available. Becton was kind of at the top of the list because he has experience. Well, he ends up signing with Philadelphia for $5 million and on a 1-year prove-it deal. And a lot of people thought, why didn't we do that? We should have done that. Well, when the reports came out, who else was interested? One, Becton was signing because he's familiar with the coaching staff there in Philadelphia. But 2, Washington wasn't even one of the ones looking to sign him.
Yeah. But I probably wouldn't have given that the Stoner stamp of approval if they had signed Becton because, like you said, he is a 1-year prove-it kind of deal. They need something a little more than that. And it's fine. People have gotten on my case quite a bit about me not liking what's going on with the offensive line at this point. I understand there's another, some people call it, there's a second round of free agency, but all the guys that are left are pretty much bums. Relatively speaking, okay? They're not bums as people. They're not bums in terms of they're some of the greatest athletes in the world. But in terms of starting in an offensive line and you want to be competitive, they're bums. And so that's what we're left with. We're left on the scrap heap. We're left with guys that nobody really wants. There's a reason they're not signed. So I just kind of have a whole issue with the way they address the offensive line in this offseason. I love what they did inside on the interior of their offensive line, Nathan. I love Biadasz. I've already forgotten how to pronounce his name. We got a lesson.
Biadasz.
Yeah. I love him.
Starting center. That's what I need.
Yep. Starting center. I love Allegretti, and I know you weren't high on Allegretti, but I think he's
not as high as you were. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that dude. So that's your left guard. And then you've got your right guard at Cosme. Man, you are locked in with a fantastic interior of your offensive line. But now what I'm concerned about is at this point, you have Andrew Wiley on the right side, and you have Cornelius Lucas on the left side. That's what is going to protect your massive investment of the number 2 overall pick, Jaden Daniels, who, by the way, has an absolutely brutal pressure to sack ratio. And so that's what you're going to do with that pressure to sack ratio is not give him any outside.
Put him under pressure?
Help, put him under pressure the whole time? Yeah. That doesn't make sense to me. That's what bothered me about this whole offseason. And I was called a lot of names. Some of them are, basically people like to say I'm a hater. But I want to defend my hater status, Nathan. And I'm going to challenge you, Nathan. And I'm going to challenge everybody who's here in the chat. Right now, I'm going to challenge you. When I give a quote-unquote hater take, I think I'm at about a 95% hit rate on my hater takes. They've been proven out. People hated them, including you, including Trev, including a ton of people. They've hated all my my hater takes. When I was pissed off about Chase Young not showing up to the voluntary OTAs,
I don't know that I give you credit for this one, but go ahead.
Now everybody hates Chase Young because he wasn't committed to the team, right? So I was right about that. I was right about when I hated on the Fedarian Mathis pick of taking a defensive tackle as insurance for Daron Payne, and then you go and you sign Daron Payne long term, those things just don't go together, right?
Yeah. So again, with this one, you're justifying. So one, I was with you on not liking the pick of Fedarian Mathis. I was with you on that one.
Right.
Where I justified it was I saw a secession plan for Washington. Now, Mathis, one, hasn't panned out due to injury. And then two, what I didn't like was the signing of Daron Payne after you make that draft pick. The whole reason why you make that draft pick, just like you would take a guy like Johnny Newton, is you don't intend on keeping three defensive tackles long term, right?
Yeah.
You're going to have some turnover type deal. Fedarian Mathis, by all rights, if healthy, could be a good player. I don't think he's an elite player. I don't think he will ever kind of live up to that second round pick, and mostly because of injuries, but also when he is on the field, he's not a game changer. And so, but he's at least a serviceable defensive tackle. And if he's healthy, maybe you can let a Daron Payne go. But the previous administration botched that whole situation.
Okay. And when I said Terry McLaurin is not a top 10 receiver, that's proved out to be true. Now people are going so far as to say he's not even wide receiver 1, which I will say that's not true either. He is wide receiver 1 on most teams, but he's just not a top 10 wide receiver. I hated on the Wes Schweitzer is another good one. I mean, he's just a guy. Everybody wanted him to be starting all the time.
No, Gus was championing Schweitzer, and he kept telling us show after show, just wait, Wes Schweitzer, he's the real deal. Never ended up being the real deal.
Yeah. I hated on Jamin Davis over JOK. I hated on Emmanuel Forbes over Christian Gonzalez. I hated on using a 3rd round pick on Brian Robinson Jr. Look, Brian Robinson Jr. is a good running back. He ain't a game changer in a 3rd round pick to be using on a guy like that, on a position like that. He's just a guy. I was a hater for obviously I could probably go on forever, right? Oh, I was on the Sam Howell deal, right? I didn't even think they should have drafted him, even in the 5th round. That was a mistake to draft him.
That was malarkey.
And sure enough, it set us back another year by having Sam Howell as the quarterback.
How did it? No, that one I'm definitely going to disagree with you.
Well, why didn't they draft a quarterback last year?
They didn't. And what quarterbacks were out there last year that would have been worth it?
Why didn't they could have gotten the quarterback position? Because they thought Sam Howell could be the guy.
Yes.
Another year goes by of wasting at a quarterback position.
And they turned, Adam Peters, again, previous administration might have botched some things, but Adam Peters turned that 5th round player into essentially a 3rd round pick.
Okay. Good job for that. That was not the right pick. It set you back for another year.
This, by the way, coming from, for our listeners, from the guy who actually said he would be happy if Adam Peters took a 2nd QB in this draft. Drafted, not undrafted like Sam Hartman.
Yeah.
Dreamy Sam Hartman.
I would have taken.
He would be okay if they would have spent one of those 5th rounders on a player, a QB, in the same draft that they took Jane Daniels. I just want to point that out. Just want to point that out.
I would have taken Sam Hartman over who's that donk safety from Washington that they took?
Dominique Hampton.
Yeah. I would have been fine.
Hampton randomly getting hate here. You haven't even seen him play. I think you'll like him.
And then I hated on bringing Eric Bieniemy in. Now, I'm not saying I'm always right. That's not what I'm saying.
He's just saying he has his patented back patter machine.
Well, when I give what's a so-called hater take, those usually pan out because I tend to look at things a little bit more objectively. And I hated what they did in this offseason to address the tackle position. And if you want to say this is a long process, whatever, it's drawn out, fine. So it's okay that your quarterback is going to get all this pressure and everything because you didn't address either of your tackle positions. That's not okay, Nathan. They went in this offseason with the most cap space in the NFL, almost $100 million in cap space. They went into the draft having the best value of draft picks of any team in the NFL because they had so many high picks in the first and second round and third round. They had 6 in the top 100 when they started the day, and they were high second rounders, high third rounders. They still have $40+ million in cap space, which is second most in the NFL. And you didn't address either tackle position. And I've got a massive problem with that. And that's why I say it's bordering on malpractice. If you get that quarterback hurt because Cornelius Lucas can't handle the left tackle position, or not even hurt, just you stump his development just in the way that they did with Sam Howell of him getting pressured all the time, then that's malpractice. You put all of this resource and money and time and effort into Jaden Daniels, and then you don't protect him. And that doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think Roger earlier kind of pointed to the fact that, one, we have seen improvements across the line. Like you mentioned, they address center, they address left guard. That's an improvement, or what we perceive on paper as an improvement over the previous season. I'm going to add to the fact that you have 3 offensive-minded coaches who are drafting up schemes right now with Jaden Daniels in mind. And that offense isn't going to be the Eric Bieniemy drop back 55 times.
You're right.
Putting Jaden Daniels in a pressure situation. In fact, from what I've seen, reading the tea leaves, it really seems, even though people associate Cliff Kingsbury with a passing offense, to me, I really see with the Anthony Lynn, with the Brian Johnson, and what DQ's kind of talking about right now is Cliff Kingsbury is here to lead this offense and to help develop a young QB, which they believe he can do. But really, what they want to do is they want to ease Jaden Daniels into this. This is going to be a running offense. Now, it's not going to be something crazy. It might not even be 55% to 45% running. It might still be slightly more passing, but that's how the leagues are run this year. But I do expect them to do their best scheming up the protection. I'm not excusing, and I'm not really a hater. We know this. I toe the line a lot. I also am a positive Perry. We call, all the time. I've been called annoyingly optimistic. I don't necessarily wear the burgundy and gold glasses all the time. I'm not saying Washington is going to be, fantastic, win the Super Bowl, though we are going to go 17-0 until we find out otherwise.
That's right.
The thing though is I try to see what's going, and I try to think what's the best situation. And right now I'm with you, Stoner, that not having a true left tackle. Now they did get Brandon Coleman, and we're going to talk about him and how he projects to be a left tackle. At the best, at the worst, he's going to be a solid left guard, is what people are saying. We need a left tackle though. But the situation why I wanted to know, and Brian earlier mentioned how they did try to go after Tyron Smith. He chose the Jets, right? But I don't remember hearing that, but I do appreciate Brian chiming in with that one. I don't remember anybody else. And our favorite, Mike Onwenu, re-signed with the Patriots. So he was never really kind of out there in the market. Yeah. And right now, I'm looking at the free agent tackles that are supposedly still available. Donovan Smith, Cam Fleming, Andres Pete, of course, Charles Leno Jr., which I do not expect him to come back this year. Playing. And Chris Hubbard. Yeah. And Leno's definitely not coming back because this is the team that cut him. So I agree. I'm a little frustrated. Now, I do, the positive Perry side of me says, hey, we got Charles Leno, who was serviceable, more than serviceable, after cuts were made, right? In this second free agent period, as rosters start forming, whatnot, there's going to be somebody available. And I think Locked On Law had said it earlier that, hey, I told you all we were going to miss Charles Leno. I was in the Leno fan club. I didn't really mean to be. It was just there. Everybody hates Charles Leno Jr. because he's not Trent Williams.
Right.
But he was more than serviceable left tackle, right? And I'm not saying we couldn't upgrade from him, but it was just like people treated him as if he were somebody who was a career backup, and he wasn't. He was a career starter, and he was a decent starter at that. So we are going to miss him, but it is frustrating we don't have a replacement, and maybe that's part of that malpractice for you. Is they cut him and they don't have they didn't have a plan necessarily in place, or at least that plan hasn't come to fruition.
Yeah. And two things. The first one is I get the Leno deal, but waiting for somebody to get cut and picking him up, that's not a plan. You can't sit here and plan on somebody hoping somebody gets cut and hoping that you like the guy enough to sign him. That's not a plan. That's a hope. Hope is not a plan.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. And the second thing is, before the draft, everybody talked about hoping that they use that plethora of draft picks to move back into the first round to get a tackle because they need a tackle. They didn't do that for a variety of reasons, whatever. Now everybody's just A-okay with it, saying, hey, they know what they're doing. This is a long-term process. We're not trying to be great next year. This is for a couple years down the road. Why is it that we switched from, yes, move back into the first round and get a tackle, to, nah, it's okay, we didn't get a tackle. We'll just deal with Cornelius Lucas or hope somebody gets cut.
To be fair, the reports were that they were trying to move into the first, that they were calling, but it takes two to tango.
Sure. They tried, but they didn't do it. Give them props for trying. Don't give them props for failing, because they didn't do it.
What would you have been okay with?
There's a massive
What would you have been
hole.
okay with trading up, though, to do that? Would you have, let's say the asking price was a next year's first, to take a first? Would you do that?
I mean, it has to be a little bit more laid out for me specifically.
Okay. You want me to give you a scenario? I got to pull up the NFL.
I need
draft.
who the guy is that you're going to get, and I need to know what I'm giving up.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm not doing it for Brandon Coleman.
Of course, no. I'm talking about a first round tackle. Okay.
Right.
Let's we've done this a couple times, so I think it's a little surprising because, you had Amarius Mims who went to the Bengals at 18, and maybe that wasn't entirely too surprising, but it was also, that was one of the places that we were looking at. Maybe we can target. The Steelers took your guy, Troy Fatanu, out of Washington. Okay. So let's say we move up to 19 then. Okay, which is the Rams, because you wanted Troy Fatanu.
Right.
Okay, so we have to move up to 19.
Okay.
And the Chargers asked for our 36, our 40, and next year's first. Would you do that?
No.
And I think that's what was happening. They were calling. What's that?
That's not the cost. 2 seconds and a first.
You're moving up to 19, all the way back from 36.
Right. You can have the 36, the 40, and the 67. I'll give you that to move up to 19 to get Troy Fautanu. Yeah. In a heartbeat. Then we're sitting here and we're talking about Jaden Daniels, your left tackle, Fautana, right? And we're not talking about this donk Johnny Newton, who, by the way, I love, but just not with the second round pick, not with 36. Mm-hmm. And you're still talking about Sinnott and possibly McCaffrey. You're still talking about the rest of your draft. You missed out on a couple of picks. So you missed out on this defensive tackle. Don't get me started on the defensive tackle.
Well, we're going to talk all about that when we get to the draft here. I like this comment from Johnny here. 7 offensive tackles went in the first round alone. That wasn't expected. It was very interesting to see how this draft planned out, right? Because one, I don't think anybody expected this draft to not have a defensive player taken until it was actually pick 15. Latu went to the Colts, and I don't think anybody expected that. No one expected Bo Nix to be the the 6th quarterback taken and 12 picks in, right?
Sure.
And then the tackles, you had teams that didn't necessarily need tackles take them. And you had Joe Alt going all the way up at 5, where I think most people expected him to fall down to the Titans. And that meant that J.C. Latham, because the Titans did need a left tackle. So the Titans ended up having to take the next tackle. And it just kind of let these dominoes fall. And then you have teams that, like I said, didn't necessarily need an upgrade, but just took that player anyways. And I'm going to include in that the Dallas Cowboys with Tyler Guyton at 29. Gus Bus had put in a situation earlier that I'll pull back up here, saying that we could have had 28 by giving up 36 and 78. I actually don't think that would have been enough, because you got to think that's actually where the Bills traded back with Kansas City. So the Bills moved back just to 32. And if you wanted the Bills to move further back than 32, I think you're going to need to give up more than 36 and 78. Because the Bills were moving back, but Kansas City jumped in to grab Worthy, and Bills only moved back 4 spots. Moving back even further was going to cost even more. And I would have to look up the particular trade details.
Right. Yeah. I'm wondering what those
what Kansas City had to give up.
Well,
what did have to have given up more than that?
What did Detroit have to give up to move into Dallas's spot at 29? Or what did Dallas have to give up to move into Detroit's spot at 29 to get Guyton? I'm just curious. I don't remember what that was. But the point is, Dallas said, we lost Tyron Smith. We need a left tackle. So we're going to go get one. So they gave up some draft capital, obviously, to move up from Detroit. Probably, maybe that was only one slot. Maybe that was only one position to go up, 1 or 2 positions to go up. But
yeah, and so actually Dallas was falling backwards for the record. Detroit moved up to Dallas's spot. So that's how that worked. And Buffalo, my AB Gus could have gotten Coleman at 36, but you got to remember the run on wide receivers, that's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
So this draft was very interesting how it ended up falling.
The whole thing is that you are going into next year's season. At this point, you are going into next season with Andrew Wiley and Cornelius Lucas as your tackles to protect the number 2 overall pick, who you've got tens of millions of dollars invested into. Your jobs are invested in Jaden Daniels. And that's what you're going to protect him with those 2 guys going into the season. And again, maybe they do something later on and somebody shakes free. That's not a plan. That's just hoping somebody shakes free and that you can go get him, because you're now going against every other team in the NFL because they are free agents at this point. That's less than ideal for me, Nathan. It's maddening. Now, overall, I love the draft, but it's just the inability to get yourself at least a left tackle that really, really bothers me. That's why it's bordering on malpractice.
I will wait. And so far, it's not looking good. So far, I'm with you, Stoner. It's not looking good. But let's wait to see the finished project, because as you mentioned, and as Command D's mentioned, right now this is looking like a great draft, and we're going to be talking about it in the game. So stick with us. We'll be joined by Joe DeLeon here in the game here to talk about Washington's 2024 NFL Draft. You can catch Joe on his own programming at Hack City Football right here on YouTube. He is Believe Network's premier college and NFL draft analyst. I believe Stoner is working behind the scenes to make sure that Joe is good to go, because we know he is on a tight schedule. So let's get started with this draft. This was something that we really, really, we felt pretty good about. And I'm eager to see Joe's thoughts, because, even though you're a pessimist and I'm an optimist, a realist. Yeah. Okay. So even though you're that, even though you literally just finished a 30-minute rant about malpractice, you like this draft. You think that the players that Washington got in this draft are fantastic. And so I really want to kind of take a look from an outside perspective. If you, who's normally a hater, is liking this, and me, who sees the best situation ever for the team, likes it, and CBS, the only A plus, to be given out on CBS, and everybody's raving about this draft for the Washington Commanders. Adam Peters knocks it out of the park. Well, let's hear from Believe Network's own Joe DeLeon to see what he thinks, as he is an expert at this draft analysis. Joe, thanks for joining us here. Again, we've been pitching your Hack City Football on YouTube. I forgot to mention, though, Joe, is you're the Rhode Island long snapper. Washington cut one and signed one in the offseason. I don't know if you're in football shape, but that might be a position battle you could win.
Yeah, I admittedly, I'm like 80 pounds under my playing weight right now. I used to be so much heavier. So I don't think I could take that phone call right now. But I have, I've talked to, for some reason, that Cameron Cheeseman situation has been something that I've been asked about a million times, because it's insane how weird it was, where he basically made the comment, "I'd cut me too." And there's some truth to that. It is a cutthroat position where if you don't play well, you're getting booted. There's one guy on every roster. So it kind of just works out like that. It's funny that he called his own firing, though.
Yeah, it was a rough situation for him, and Washington fans we liked the guy because he was very affable, very likable. But Washington, Ron Rivera traded up into the 5th round to get him, and then he had just 2 okay seasons, and then that disastrous season that led to him being cut, where people couldn't figure out what was going on. So he's not here. And Washington, thank goodness, did not move up to draft another long snapper this time. What they did do, Joe, is what we feel is a pretty good draft. Now, you're on the outside, and on your Twitter bio, you say you probably hate our favorite team. So how do you feel about Adam Peters and these Washington Commanders?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, they're one of the few teams that I think were removed from the conversation of trading back and acquiring picks. They needed to get their quarterback situation figured out. This is a team that has not had a steady hand at quarterback in such a long time. So for them to get Jayden Daniels, who I think is the best fit for Cliff Kingsbury's offense, is amazing for them. I think, and right now, he's my pick for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think that because he is such a good athlete, he is going to rush for a ton of yards. He's going to throw for a ton of yards. And that is going to be enough for him to lead the award. I don't know if the Commanders necessarily get to the playoffs like CJ Stroud got his team to the playoffs, but he is just the type of guy that is just so gifted as a playmaker, who I wasn't bought in on originally, and I totally see the vision now. He is going to be great for this Commanders team. I think where I draw my attention to in the rest of this draft class is them finding value with the rest of their picks. I loved that they took Jer'Jon Newton, and that they were not going to overthink that selection. Seemingly other teams were, because other defensive tackles that I don't think are nearly as good as him were selected over him. And the Commanders don't really need defensive linemen. We know that their interior group is the best unit. But now that we're adding Newton, who is the most disruptive, in my opinion, defensive lineman in this class, he is impossible to keep up with when he is cooking, and he is going to help free up so many other players. To add him into the mix not only boost the level of the unit, but it also could potentially create opportunities to free up cap space if you did want to move on from Jonathan Allen or Daron Payne at some point in the next couple of years. You're not hamstrung by any of that. And then on top of this, Mike Sandstrill is a quality corner for them, one of the more underrated players that was a bit of a late guy that was loved by the general overall national media. I loved that they took Ben Sinnott from Kansas State, who is very physical. He's got that hard-nosed, grind you into the ground type of mentality, but is also still a very good receiver. I think a lot of people pigeonhole him as this H-back, but he's got the frame and the build and the athletic traits to be a good starting tight end in the NFL, and that's a position that certainly needs to be figured out. And then the last one that like caught my attention was Jordan McGee, the Temple linebacker. He is a huge work in progress. Like he needs a ton of help in terms of getting to a level where he's going to be a competent playmaker and a competent defender. But at the very least, you're getting a really good special teamer because he's really fast. He's very, very athletic.
Let me kind of push back a little bit on going back to Johnny Newton. I'm one of those guys who overthought it. Not that a different defensive tackle should have been taken in front of him. But my issue with him is kind of some of the things you said, right? John Allen's there. Deron Payne's there. They're already strong at that position. And to use that kind of draft capital just because it's great value doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because you're choosing him you're taking him at the expense of somebody who can help you a little bit more in positions that they absolutely need, like a left tackle or whatever. So are you saying that you just kind of believe, just in general, that BPA, best player available, is usually just a better strategy than going and getting somebody you need?
I think that when you have a weak roster, no offense, Commanders fans, when you've got a lot of roster holes and you're just looking for athletes and you're trying to improve and you're trying to get better, best player available, I think is always should be the approach. If you're trying to reach, if you're trying to make moves based on positions of need. And I think at that spot there were some tackles worthy of the conversation, like Roger Rosengarten or Kingsley Somatea, maybe worth the conversation. But for a guy who I think most of the NFL had graded as a top 25 pick, but seemingly what may have scared them away was some injury stuff, some personality stuff. That was the only reason for it. For him to fall that far and be available for the Commanders, I think is a huge get. I also think for something like this, it's a unique circumstance. This isn't like you had Newton and you had a tackle with the same grade. They were ranked one right after the other. And you said, we're just going to take Newton because he's ahead of him. I think this is a spot where most teams, except for the few that picked ahead of him, decided to pass on him and still had a really good grade on him. And it's just the opportunity presents itself. I think this is going to be one of those picks where, and I can understand it, there's going to be frustration from Commanders fans. In a couple of years, maybe even just after this year, I think the attitude is going to be a lot different.
Yeah, I'm excited about Johnny Newton. Now, there's a couple different interesting things there. You're talking about the teams ahead. It went wide receiver at the top of the second round, but the Atlanta Falcons, bizarre draft from them regardless, with the Penix at 8 pick, but they took Clemson defensive tackle Aurora Horo. Why was Newton falling that far? Like I know Adam Peters said he was surprised that Newton was available, and I did some charting where Newton was looked at anywhere from 11 to 25. Why did he fall to Washington there at 36?
I don't have the full context on it, but like what I had heard loosely is just that he was rubbing some folks the wrong way throughout the pre-draft process. And like I don't have, again, the full context of like what he did that scared some people away. But for whatever it was, he just was somebody that during the interviews, some NFL teams thought, maybe let's not invest in this guy in the first round. Let's maybe not grab this guy. I think Roro going before him, though, was the example of the Falcons not having a very good board this year. And they're easy to criticize because of some of the other decisions that they made, but they had a lot of picks that were way against the grain. And they've been a team in the past couple of years that have overdrafted traitsy players like Roro, and those players necessarily have not panned out. So I wouldn't really count their decision-making in line with how it could affected the Commanders' decision-making.
Yeah, once again, we're joined here on Ref the District by Joe DeLeon, who is part of the Believe Network. He's the college football and NFL draft analyst. Joe, let me ask you about pick number 100 for Washington. It's the guy who I think was their best pick in the draft, and that's Luke McCaffrey from Rice, the wide receiver. He's a big receiver. He's a physical. He's obviously the bloodlines are there with the McCaffrey family and all. Is this a guy, I think he's going to start right away in the slot. Is this a guy who is going to be somebody who is going to make some of those other guys, we're going to forget about some of those other top wide receivers, or is he just kind of a guy who's going to fit in?
I think he's more the guy that's going to fit in. I think he's going to be a really good special teamer. He's somebody that you want to put on punt, you want to put on kickoff, kick return, all of those things. I think it happened with Brendan Rice. It happened with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. Some of these guys that have these NFL bloodlines, that stuff's certainly important. It's easy to find success with guys that have NFL players in their family, their fathers, their siblings. Those guys tend to work out because they have a similar work ethic, all that stuff. But he's not the same player as Christian McCaffrey, which I don't think there's that expectation that he will be. There's certainly upside though there. I think that you're definitely, as it sounds like you're recognizing, the upside is there. He's not somebody who's going to come in day one, be an early contributing starter. But in a couple of years, he has the tools, the frame, the traits to maybe become the third receiver on the roster. We've seen guys like him find success in the NFL, and it's certainly possible. His dad was a great, big, strong receiver, and I think that we could, totally see that happen with Luke McCaffrey. But at the very, very least, and why it is a good pick, where you took him in the third round, you're going to get a really, really good special teams guy.
Yeah, I was surprised, maybe because I just always envision his brother Christian as a shorter running back type that Luke, comes in at 6'2". So Washington fans wanted a big wide receiver. We end up getting that one. There were some other targets they wanted. There were a lot of offensive line targets. You mentioned, taking Newton over some of those targets that were available at 36. Washington was back up at 40, and Doug would like your opinion on Washington trading back from 40. I know you love Sanistril when we picked at 50, but that was an opportunity Washington could have taken a tackle at that point if they wanted to.
I'm always an advocate for trading back in the middle rounds, especially when you're a team that is just trying to fill out your roster. I think that trying to get too caught up, as I kind of alluded to earlier, trying to get too caught up with addressing specific team needs, it can kind of trap you in developing your class and putting together a good class. So I'm always in favor of the trade back. What were the exact assets that they got from it? Because there's obviously so many trades. It's hard to remember every single one.
That would be Sanistril and Sinnott, right?
We end up getting, we took 50 and 53. So we ended up with 2 second-round picks, but we had also given them 78 in return. It ended up being a wash, essentially. Is like, if you look at like the draft calculator, trade calculators, Washington got minimal value out of it.
Okay. Well, I mean, for them to end up, did they originally have the 2 second-round picks? Is I think the better. Okay.
So they had 36 and 40, and then what they ended up doing is they dropped back from 40 to get 50 and 53, and they moved one of their third-round picks to do it. So they ended up with 3 second-round picks rather than the 2 that they originally had. And then they picked 50 and 53. I also want to note, for everybody who wants an offensive tackle, all of those tackles were still on the board when they picked Mike Sanistril and Ben Sinnott.
Right.
So I know I love those picks, but I just want people to understand they didn't want those tackles who were available at that point.
Yeah, and there were tackles also still on the board, like way at the end of the second round. Like Roger Rosengarten is the one that pops in my mind, and Kingsley Somatea. They both ended up going much later than I anticipated or would have willingly taken them.
63.
Yeah. So it's not like that they took Sanistril in priority over those tackles. Clearly the priority was best available if we pay attention to a lot of the way that they picked in some of these rounds. And them getting Brandon Coleman, I think, doesn't really answer having a starting player. He's more of a swing depth piece, in my opinion. But for them to, for there to be any fear of them not trying to address tackle to go after those guys, you're still getting 2 starters. That at the end of the day, if you get 2 guys that you're confident in being starters, that's what's most important.
So Gus here from our audience is chiming in. So Washington traded away 40, 78, and 152 to get Philadelphia's 50, 53, and 161. Cooper DeJean was Philadelphia's pick, and then Washington comes out and takes Mike Sanistril with the pick 50.
Okay. I mean, I still think it's, I don't think it's bad strategy for them to have ended up with those 2 second rounders. I think it worked out for them considering that they ended up with Sandustil and Sinnott.
I do love both of those picks as well. I think those are a couple of guys who are going to be starters right from the jump and are going to be here for quite a while, especially when you're starting tight end as Zach Ertz, who gets hurt. And I think he's about 53 years old, somewhere around there. He's an old dude. But let me ask you, Joe, a little kind of off topic just a little bit, but the state of college football. I know you're a big college football guy and you follow it everywhere. I have kind of this idea in my head that in about 10 years, there's not going to necessarily be college football. There's just going to be like minor league football that's just associated with colleges. So there'll still be Alabama football. They'll still play for Alabama, but they'll just be minor league players getting ready for the NFL. Don't even go to school or anything. How do you kind of see the way things are going with paying players and guys transferring basically almost as often as they want? What's the kind of the story of college football for the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And there's a lot of lawsuits that are really shaping the direction that things are moving. And the most pivotal right now is the House versus NCAA case that's occurring. And right now they're progressing towards a settlement in that case. And that, I think, is going to shape how things are going to look. That is probably the precursor for revenue sharing, creating some sort of a cap space, if you will, for these programs and how they're going to be able to pay players directly and have school directed NIL for these programs. I agree in the way that you're saying it. I wouldn't necessarily classify it as minor league. I think that we're going to have some consolidation and some teams drop off just because programs like Stanford probably wouldn't benefit them to keep football around financially. And they've even toyed with the idea of cutting other sports. I don't really see it making sense for them to continue to have football, but we're going to progress eventually towards less programs. I think there's going to be less transferring because part of what would be a collective bargaining agreement would be saying, all right, if you sign with a school, you have to stick for 2 years, you have to stick for 3 years. There's going to be a certain time frame for those contracts. But I think that we definitely are playing towards that where it is going to be more professionalized. And I think that's good for the sport. I think that once we entered into the NIL era, it has created an unfixable mess. Before that, college football was great. I think that we all love that version of college football, but because of unforeseen circumstances and the way that these court cases have handed out, it has become a huge, huge mess. So the only way that we fix it is professionalizing it, having a revenue share, collective bargaining, all of that stuff. And it's going to a way, look like minor league, but I think the product is going to be so exciting that I wouldn't really consider it to be, minor leagues.
Yeah, I definitely, I think a lot of people are so focused on what college football used to look like, but I think you can actually track back to the 80s where things started to change, right? Where it became less about, even though NCAA always talked about student athletes, it became less about student athletes and more about the revenue that was coming in through sporting programs. And that started being kind of the focal point, and it just kind of steamrolled now to 2024, where you have, this is $1 billion organization and you have 18 and 19-year-olds that are your workforce that aren't seeing that kind of money. Back in the days, the 80s, the 90s, I don't know how many old used cars did you sell there, Joe? Because that used to be the thing, right? And I think that once we shift into what it could be, this kind of the semi-pro, the minor league type situation for the NFL, I think people will see that it's still exciting. You have people who watch this spring, football, right? XFL and USFL are not, doing fantastic, but they're not dead like they had been in years past. So there's a market for this. So I think it'll be pretty fantastic when we get there. So moving back to the draft, because that's a whole other pod that we could be talking about on that one. Johnny here pointing out that, specifically about Luke McCaffrey high on the RAS. The entire draft actually for Washington rated out, according to Kindle Platt, as the highest RAS of this draft. You have Next Gen Stats that also said Washington very high in kind of like these athletic based scores. The other thing that was noted is most of these picks were captains on their respective teams. Where does that where do you find that to kind of fall in line with what coaches and what teams are looking for? Is this kind of new, or is this something that's always been? They want captains, they want athletes, essentially.
I think the captain aspect absolutely has been something that has just been kind of hilariously an overly focused thing in the pre-draft process. Not saying that's a bad thing for the Commanders. If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense for it to be good for roster building. You want high character guys. You want guys that are leaders. You want guys that are going to motivate the guys around them and hold them accountable. So it's a good thing, but it's also in a way a cliche, the way I think I would describe it, where it's something that these old school NFL GMs are like, he needs to be X weight. He needs to be a winner in college. He needs to
hand size needs to be, all that kind of stuff.
Right. The athleticism, though, has always been important, but I think now more than ever, there's more metrics, there's more analytics, there's more science behind being able to understand what certain thresholds are important for success. And that's why I love Kentley Platt. Like, he's one of the examples, probably the most public example out of anybody. There's other examples that are far less public, that are trackable, but his ability to really explain, hey, these are the numbers that certain guys need to hit in order to have long-term success in the NFL. You know, we talk about the offensive linemen, their short area numbers, something that's not talked about. We overemphasize bench press, the short area, and even the 40-yard dash, so unuseful. But if you have good short area numbers and you've got quick feet, usually means that you're going to find a way to work in the NFL. And like, one of the examples I think of is somebody had tweeted, or he had tweeted out Jarvis Landry's RAS score, which was horrible. Like, I don't even think it was like a 1. I think it was like less than a 1, or it was like a 2 or something like that. And somebody quote tweeted and was like, oh, it just shows that anybody can make it. And he quote tweeted back and said, no, this is an exception. You know, he's the only person who has succeeded with these terrible physical metrics. So don't think that you're going to see this again. Instead, you need to be in this pocket. So I think that now more than ever, we're able to actually calculate and know which guys work, instead of just looking at a guy like Patrick Paul, who's just big and wide and long, but physically he doesn't move that well. So we're not going to get super, we're not going to be super bought in on a prospect like that.
All right, Joe, my last question for you here. Who are the Giants taking number 1 overall next year in the 2025 draft?
Do you guys know I'm a Giants fan? Is that why you're asking that?
No idea.
I think that, man, I really, they need to get a quarterback. I know for a fact that they're going to be picking a quarterback, or at the least they might be a team like the Falcons that might be signing somebody. So if they sign somebody in free agency, James Pierce Jr., somebody I get excited over, or I like Carson Beck and I like Cam Ward. Those are the 2 quarterbacks that I'm all in on right now.
Wow. Okay.
All right, you hear it first overall next year from the New York Giants, the QB. Well, Joe, we appreciate you jumping on. We know you got to bounce here. So again, you can catch Joe on his own Believe Network program, Hack City Football. Where else can they find you?
At Joe DeLeon on X.com. Hack City, the first team, wherever you find podcasts. And guys, I appreciate you having me on. It's going to be a nice slow off season after this week, but I appreciate getting the chance to recount the Commanders draft class.
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks again, Joe. You have a wonderful night, and we'll have to have you back on next year when Washington's picking in the 20s, because we sneak into the playoff with our offensive rookie of the year, like you said, and Jaden Daniels.
For sure. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks. So moving back into the draft here, there was one question we did hear from him, Justin. So when he talked about Coleman, he said wasn't a starter necessarily. He rates him more as a swing tackle. So not as high. Yeah, not as high on Coleman as probably we would want to have heard. So that was
Coleman is everybody's savior, Nathan. For all the haters like me, they're we got Coleman in 3rd round. He's going to be the guy. He's going to be a stud. And and then
we honestly, I'm in that crew. I'm not saying he's a stud. And there was some interesting stats with him that were put out there. Let me see if I can bring this up, because it was of note. It was dealing with the RAS score. So Washington, of course, looking to get, players high on the RAS score, and the Burgundy blog had tweeted out about this. Now, regardless of the context of that tweet itself, Trent Williams scored a 9.53 and Brandon Coleman scored a 9.7. Now, this doesn't mean that Brandon Coleman's going to be Trent Williams, but you can see a lot of similarities in their scores, namely that both work on the smaller side for tackles. They're only listed at 6'4", so that was something there. But like all the metrics that you need, and the big point for that would be like the 3-cone and the shuttle. These are ones that you want. So I know a lot of people were pretty high on Patrick Paul. Washington fans were, but you just heard it from Joe, right? This is a guy who he's massive, but he's not somebody who moves well. So that's why you don't necessarily take a guy like that. And that could have been why, they didn't take Suamatea or Rosengarter, who both, by the way, were in Washington. Those were top 30 guys. And that's where I want to point out over and over again, we wanted them to take a tackle at each of these positions. They chose not to take the tackles that were there.
Yeah.
Now, and so that's why, and this is where we put that trust in Adam Peters and the evaluators, because they're smarter at football than we are.
100%.
And so that's what I just want to point out over and over again. We wanted them to do the thing. They didn't do the thing.
Yeah.
Well, they had the opportunity. So they saw something we're not seeing.
Sure.
And they took a guy in Brandon Coleman at 67, who some people have him as a left tackle. There are some people who have him as a left guard. We just heard from Joe, who said he's a swing tackle. So
yeah,
it's going to be an interesting thing as far as that's concerned. I am somebody who there, and yes, Gus Bus, this is probably Sam Cosmi might be one of the first players I first started, because me, I'm the analytics guy, right? That's my point here in Ref the District. Stoner does his sniff test. I'm all about the numbers, and Sam Cosmi was one of the first ones I looked at, like for RAS, and I then started doing a deep dive in all this. So I am very high on RAS. I am very high on specific drills and looking at numbers. That's one of the reasons why the Jaden Daniels pick concerns me, right? Was because of the fact that he's never had a season with less than 20% pass to sack ratio. That's the line. We talk about 3-cone drills for offensive linemen and having a line to be successful. Well, to be a QB in the NFL, you have to be under 20%. And the closest he got was 20.2 his senior year. And so that's where we're now having to hope that he's Jarvis Landry.
Not a single quarterback in the history of this particular stat, the pressure to sack ratio, who have been over 20% in their college career, not a single one has ever succeeded at the NFL level. And Jaden Daniels is above that number, and they did not address the offensive tackle position to help with the pressure. That's a problem. And you're right, Nathan. They are so much smarter than us. They have so much more information than us. But that's what we do. We stand on the outside and we look at the big picture and we say, are we really going to go into week 1 with Cornelius Lucas and then Brandon Coleman backing him up, and Braden Daniels, who was last year's 4th round pick, who we all hoped would be a left tackle at some point, and
he was always a guard,
or even guard, in which he was just bad from day one in training camp and then ended up getting hurt. And then you're going to have Andrew Wiley with Trent Scott backing him up. That's your plan from the outside looking in. That's not a great plan. That's not a great position that they're in right now. They could get lucky. It could change. But as I see it right now, that's a problem.
Deluxe, I love this here. RAS can give you a higher ceiling. Tape will help identify the floor. Interview and person decide the fate. That end situation too. I've long said, Stoner panned Chase Young for a long time. Said we could have had, who's the
Justin
kid out
Herbert,
there? Justin Herbert And I told him time and time again, Justin Herbert in Washington would not have been the guy he loves out in LA. So the situation, there's a lot that goes into it. And you're absolutely right. It's one of the reasons why the draft is such a lottery. I mean, it is very, very different how things work. Now, Johnny coming in clutch here as Coleman started 22 games at left tackle the last 2 years combined. He played left tackle. In fact, his 2022 tape was fantastic. He played injured, and they also had to rotate him because of some injuries on the line. But he can play guard, would ball for sure, but he's a unit at left tackle. Don't sleep, and you don't have to sleep either. If you head over to don'tsleepenergy.com, use the code DISTRICT to get yourself 10% off your entire order. They have great merchandise. They're great people, a local company to the DMV, so you can support local. And if you use the code, you support yourself by saving a few dollars there. Don't Sleep Energy makes you great. And I'm telling you, right now, I've been having some late nights and early mornings, and I've been needing my Don't Sleep Energy to get me through. So Don't Sleep makes you great. Thanks, Johnny, for that wonderful segue into our ad read for that one. So yes, TJ, I loved it. When you guys pitch the softball, pitch me those, I will always take them. That's
knock it out of the park.
Fun thing to do for me. Let's get back into the draft. Your favorite pick. You mentioned this with Joe. I don't know that I heard you say this before. I was a little surprised. Yeah. Your favorite pick was 100, Luke McCaffrey.
Yeah. I don't know what there's not to like about him, Nathan. There's everything. Look at his measurables. Look at his RAS scores. Look at his vertical. Just look at his 10-yard, his 20-yard. All of that stuff is off the charts. He's 6'2". He's exactly what this team needed in terms of being a big slot receiver. I advocated in the offseason that they go out in free agency and get one of those big receivers like a Michael Pittman Jr., but they decided not to spend the big money. That's great. And then they drafted one, which I thought is awesome. The bloodlines are there, Jimmy Lee Patterson. The bloodlines are there. Don't shy away from the
for audio listeners. Jimmy here is calling out the nepotism.
Yeah, great. I love that. When it's a guy, when your dad was a Super Bowl winning receiver, and your brother should have won the MVP of the league.
If MVP wasn't a QB award these years, then he absolutely should have won.
An absolute stud, probably a Hall of Famer, Christian McCaffrey. Even those years he was toiling in Carolina, he was fantastic. So yeah, if that's the guys that you're calling out nepotism on, fine. I'll take that every day. So I love Luke McCaffrey. He's exactly what this team needed. He can actually do some return duties as well. He can play special teams. He's faster than you think. He's 6'2", like I said. His measurables are off the charts. Fantastic pick. My favorite pick of the draft. And I love Sanistril as well. I love Sinnott as well. And of course, I mean, I don't even think we've mentioned in terms of the draft pick, we haven't even mentioned Jaden Daniels. And that was obviously a fantastic pick at number 2 overall.
I think very overlooked because of that in that regard. Yeah. So by the way, Christian McCaffrey was 3rd in voting for the MVP award. Lamar Jackson obviously won it, and Lamar is fantastic. We talk about it being a QB award. Do you remember who came in second?
Who would have come in second? Mahomes or Purdy?
Brock Purdy came in 4th, and that's one of the things I wanted to look at because a lot of people were touting Brock Purdy as MVP, and I didn't think that was right. Mahomes was actually just above CJ Stroud and behind Tyreek Hill. Dak Prescott was 2nd in MVP.
Hold on, are you looking at the right thing? Come on.
I'm looking. I kid you not.
Get Gus on.
Kid you not.
Did
February 8th, 2024, from Rob Maddie. He tweeted out all the stuff. He's a senior NFL writer, and that's how it broke out. It was crazy. Doug, I do agree with that. As far as nepotism, it's not quite what that word means. Nepotism was Kyle Shanahan getting hired by Mike Shanahan, right?
Yeah.
Like it's bringing up your own kid in there. This is more when you're drafting a guy like McCaffrey, who, by the way, a lot of people, and I said this in that draft video as well, right? We expected to hear the word Rice being said, but because we all thought Brendan Rice, who is Jerry Rice's son, we had Jerry Rice Jr. here in Washington. That didn't work out, but this guy, 6'2", smooth runner, thought that, hey, this is going to be the one. This is the pick at 100. Brendan Rice kept falling past that. We get Luke McCaffrey out of Rice, which I think does speak volumes to, and I'm going to go back to that RAS score, the kind of similar traits to Nakua, who came out of nowhere seemingly last year and had a heck of a rookie year. And you kind of see some of that from McCaffrey. Do not put that level of expectation on him. Right. I agree with Joe, who we had on. Expect a special teams person. Expect somebody to have, what would be a good season, do you think, for Luke McCaffrey? Receiving only.
I mean, yeah, let's not get carried away with a slot receiver when you've got Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, and hopefully a run-first offense with Jaden Daniels at the helm. So, I mean, if he can give you somewhere around 30 catches, right, and a couple 100 yards and maybe a couple of touchdowns, that's all you need from your receiver. What you need for him to be is somebody who can move the sticks. Somebody when it's 3rd and 4 will get you those 5 tough yards by going over the middle and finding a hole in the zone, something like that. That's what you kind of need to look at for him. How many first downs can he get for you? Which is what Curtis Samuel did a lot, right? Curtis Samuel wouldn't touch the ball a heck of a lot, but when he did, he got you those first downs. Sure. But you need a bigger guy to do that than a Curtis Samuel, so I was okay with letting him go. Curtis Samuel go as long as you got a big receiver in his place. So let's not get too caught up kind of in just those basic numbers, but get it to the point where he's getting those tough first downs and making plays for you.
Yeah, so someone did ask about RAS, that is relative athletic score. Thanks, Locked On Law, for answering that. But in case you miss it throughout all the chat, that is what it is. So that's your favorite pick. I am eager to find out from our 300 viewers right now that over the 3 platforms, who was your favorite pick from the Washington Commanders in this NFL draft? Jaden Daniels might be a slam dunk for a lot of people, and that is a good pick there. I know you mentioned Mike Sanistro was another one that you liked. Jordan McGee, Joe loved that one, and that one is going to be interesting. I know he's a little bit undersized, but that's somebody to kind of mention there. I know Ben Sennett's going to win over a lot of fans. The way he plays, if all he ends up doing is 3 catches for 25 yards average a game, people are going to love him, right?
Oh,
they just need to see one block where he lights somebody up, or one athletic catch, and they're going to be all over him in the same way that Adam Peters mentioned from Juice from the 49ers. Because I would say I personally see more of that in him than I see Kittle. It would be great if he can be both. It'd be great if he could be both. My favorite pick is your least favorite pick, and that's Johnny Newton.
Yeah.
I don't get it. More and more, I know that you hate it. I think maybe the reason why I do love this pick is because I am so big on best player available. And as Joe mentioned, in this stage of the roster, you just need to take dudes. And this guy is a dude. I had not heard from that of as far as like ruffling people's feathers. That might be the reason why DQ loves him. Yeah, because of that. And he's out there on Twitter. He's asking, hey, tell me the lingo, and everyone's telling him to avoid U Street. He's like, oh no, I'm not doing that. I'm here to play foosball. Great conversations happening over on his Twitter account. Seems like a fun rookie, but he is somebody who I think will absolutely be a menace. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Joe Witt Jr. and DQ kind of design to keep them. We had someone mention earlier, I'll see if I starred this. It doesn't look like I did, but they played, Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne played 85% of the snaps last year. Right. You can't do that. These guys, even though they're in their prime, right? They're in their prime years. They're just under 30. They're physically strong. They've played the game enough to know how to use, their full skill set. Jonathan Allen was ranked as one of the top NFL defensive tackles and top NFL players not that long ago. Bringing in Newton allows them to do so many things and be disruptive. I've long said that Jonathan Allen allows Daron Payne to be as disruptive, because a lot of people prefer Payne over Allen. It's because people aren't watching. This is where you need your eyes, right? People look at the box score and they see Daron Payne have sacks and they're like, well, he's the better defensive tackle. No, he's getting that because Jonathan Allen has 3 people trying to block him. You won't be able to put 3 people on Jonathan Allen and have try to do a double team on Daron Payne and let your running back or a wide receiver take out Andre Jones or KJ Henry. I know we have new people, but my point is that's what was happening last year. Yeah. Now you have Newton who can line up, and seeing what they're going to do. We've seen that Cinco front, that 5-man front, and I like Ridgeway. And Mathis is a guy who I feel like we haven't seen the full potential to. Not saying he's ever going to live up to it, but we still haven't seen it. If he starts to live up to that potential, maybe we had something there, but he's gone, right? Mathis is gone. Ridgeway, he's just another guy, right? Like, so now you have 3 dudes who you're going to put anywhere on the line and cause havoc. I love that pick.
Yeah, and I've said it a couple of times as well. And so if you're new or if you haven't been here from the beginning, in terms of the guy, I love Johnny Newton as well. I just don't love the pick. I don't like using that pick at number 36 overall. But look, those guys are smarter than me. But the player itself, love everything about him. Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, one of a finalist for the Nagurski Award for the best defensive player in all of college football, the only defensive lineman who was up for that award. So yeah, he's got the bona fides. He's got the resume to be able to come into the NFL and wreak havoc. So that's great, but I just didn't like picking him at 36. If they had gotten, let's just say they took him at 36 and then at 40, they took a tackle, right? Now you got my attention. Now I'm not so mad at taking a defensive guy, but to wait all the way until the 3rd round to finally get your tackle, and you took a defensive tackle in front of that, that's the issue that I have with it. But my favorite guy, and then some people have said it, McCaffrey was one of them, but I also love Sandstrill. I love that pick. He's undersized. I get it, but he's got everything about him. When we talked to Joe DeLeon, when he said that, captaincy is kind of a big deal when you get guys like that. He was a captain. He was the MVP of the Michigan defense, which was the best defense in the country, which was the national champion, right? How can you not love a guy like that? So I'm really happy about that pick as well. So I would go in order. Jaden doesn't count. Jaden Daniels, obviously.
Jaden's probably a slam dunk, right?
He's number 1, by a long shot. But if you don't count him, I would go McCaffrey 1, then Sandstrill 2, and then Sinnott 3.
Yeah, Sandstrill is another one that I really, really love. Those first 2 picks in that 2nd round, I know we wanted offensive tackle. It wasn't until I kind of was looking at the draft overall and seeing how many tackles and how many times Washington chose not to take the guys before Brandon Coleman that I realized they weren't looking at them, especially the guys they brought in for a top 30, right? And maybe Jordan Morgan was going to be somebody who they wanted at 36, maybe potentially, but then Green Bay took him, which was a little bit of a shock there. But Newton and Sandstrill are, I believe, some of the most lights out defending players that are in this draft. I'm really excited to see them. I like Ben Sinnott. I was shocked they took him as high as they did. A lot of people had Sanders out of Texas as rated higher. That's a guy who is very athletic, but doesn't really get the position. Ben Sinnott, though, I think lines up, does everything they want. So I think that one's good. But Jordan McGee is probably the one I'm most interested on the back end. When you're talking about the day 3 guys, McGee is somebody who I think we will like. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him because he is a little also undersized, but he is full motor and like this guy will hit. If you like watching Sandstrill, just run across the field and light somebody up. Jordan McGee will be doing the same thing at just a little bit bigger size. So that one will be pretty good.
All right. I mean, I guess so. The guys later on, McGee, Jean-Baptiste, right? I mean,
Jean-Baptiste and Dominique Hampton.
And Hampton, whatever. These guys, I disrespect anybody who gets drafted 5th round or later. Some of them pop out. Loved Cam Curl, who's a 7th rounder, right? And there are guys who can make plays. Guys like who, not Toohill, James Smith Williams was a 7th rounder.
Yeah, that's why Jean-Baptiste is worrisome for me. It's like we just got William Bradley King and James Smith Williams, and we just replaced them with another lawyer-like name.
Yeah, and then you had Andre Jones Jr. and KJ Henry, who were late round picks last year.
Mm-hmm.
So don't expect much from them. Just hope that they make the team. Usually, draft picks will all make the team just to see if you can develop them over the course of time. But yeah, those guys just kind of. They're out of sight, out of mind for me right now.
Draft picks tend to make teams not just for development, but because they were recent draft picks, teams tend to have more focus on them. Remember, John Ridgway was a 5th round pick put on the practice squad that Washington pilfered, right? Because you have recency bias there of being like, oh, that's right, I like that guy. Maybe we can take him and make him into something. So that is one of the reasons why they tend to make the roster. Now, this roster is completely changed from what we had last year. Last year, winning 4 games and able to pick Jaden Daniels. So you can also put that one on Sam Howell, Stoner. Why that was a good pick for Washington because it landed Jaden Daniels. But this roster, seeing nearly 40 different names on it, an insane amount of turnover, and we'll be talking about that here in the cool down. Mentioned that this roster has a lot of turnover and there is some excitement within Washington fans as far as where they're going to end up here. I mentioned BetOnline only like an 18% chance to win, or get into the playoffs, but you have some people like Byron here. No way they get under 10 or 11 wins. That this team is so stacked. You have RJ. We're getting 10 plus wins this year, stamped. And then you have Gregory, who's more in line with Stoner, usually 5 to 7 wins this year. And Gus Bus, surprisingly, putting this one in here, just baffling to me. This was earlier. I'm okay with how the front office is handling things, specifically talking about the left tackle situation. But I also want us to finish 6-11 to get more elite rookies. You're wishing for us to get 6-11? That's insanity. But this roster does feel like it's going to be better here. And we have people kind of coming in with their Preston with 8 wins. And I'm looking forward to seeing where people kind of put us in that. But Stoner, this roster was not good. And Adam Peters talked about that very openly, very candidly, talked about how, there's some good things to this roster, but this roster needs to get updated and it needs guys that DQ likes. We had Kevin in here. I think both Mathis and Ridgway are gone at some point because they're not light and fast tackles like Quinn's defense wants, right? That they prefer. And I think that's interesting when you start to see how much of this roster is getting filled with those Dan Quinn guys, with those Cliff Kingsbury guys, where how things are going to kind of fall and where we're going to see the camp battles. Reminder, rookie mini camp is going to start on the 10th. And then we'll have voluntary OTA starting shortly after that. So we're going to bring you all the information that we can hear. Stoner's going to have his board going for the Jaden Daniels good day, Jaden Daniels bad day, because that's usually how you can tell how things are going and how things are developing. Although Sam Howell did end up with more good days and then crashed fairly early. So let's talk about this roster, Stoner, and where we know we have a hole at left tackle. The rest of the line's looking pretty good. QB seems set now.
Yeah.
Running back room seems good. Wide receiver room seems good. Tight end room's gotten a huge improvement.
Yeah.
So where are the holes?
No, I think they've made some tremendous improvements. As you said, there's at least 40 new guys who are going to be on this team. And when you have a 4-13 team, that's what should happen. You should have huge turnover in your roster, and they've done a lot of that. You have your stalwarts like McLaurin and Payne and Allen and guys like Jamin Davis who are all coming back, Dotson, things like that. But basically, most of your team is completely rebuilt. So I like a lot of what we look at. But what I don't really see a whole lot of, again, are those blue chippers, are those all pro guys, huge difference makers. There are some really good players out here, but we don't have, at least when you're looking at it right now, we don't have those guys where people are going to have to absolutely game plan for. You're obviously going to plan for Terry McLaurin. You're going to plan for guys like that, even an Austin Eckler, but you don't have like game changers yet. And some of these guys could be that they've signed in the offseason. Look, Frankie Louvu could be that guy, right? And he's a guy that they signed to a bigger deal. Dorrance Armstrong could be a difference maker. We'll have to see. And then guys on offense, Austin Eckler actually could be. And of course, the biggest question of all is what is Jaden Daniels going to do in terms of how he's going to run the offense, how efficient it's going to be. Can he pick up Cliff Kingsbury's system? Can he run it to perfection? All of those things. But kind of just looking at the roster, it looks to me right now to just be basically an average roster. Again, where they almost always finish is in that 7, 8, 9 win type team at this point. So let's not get carried away. This is a long-term process. In that part, I have a lot of trust in Adam Peters to be able to continue to build a really good roster, but they've got to get game changers, and they don't have those guys right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think that there's a lot of accolades. We talked about MVP earlier in the show. Dak Prescott getting the second place in the MVP. I think some of that stuff's overrated. I don't believe all pros are overrated. Pro Bowl is. I want more all pro guys. And I thought Jonathan Allen 2 seasons ago, he was playing at an all pro level.
Yeah.
Payne's had some good seasons, but you're right. These aren't necessarily, this isn't an Aaron Donald that you're talking about. This isn't, a situation where, I'm trying to think of on defense. Yes, we have some guys who used to be dogs, but we don't necessarily have, maybe not dogs is the right word because I think that term also gets overused, but we do, like I said, we don't have those top 100 guys, those guys who are going to be in the top 50 who people game plan. Now, that being said, I'm with TJ who said wins isn't really what it's important. Let's have a competent offense or competent defense. And I do think that the sum of the whole could be greater than parts, I believe is the saying, right? Like, so maybe we don't have a guy who is an all pro guy, but if the defense plays well against good teams, because we've seen inflated stats over the last few years where they've been ranked fairly highly, but the competition hasn't necessarily been there.
Yeah.
Let's lock down a good team and let's play, let's take out bad teams. Those are the things I would like us to see. And I think winning in the margins is important here. And that's where I think that Washington is slowly improving. It is going to be a process. But when you're changing out guys, like we mentioned, Ridgeway and Mathis kind of leaving to kind of make way for a Newton, like that's an upgrade, right? And you're taking out guys like James Smith-Williams and Casey Two-Sacks, and you're replacing them with Randy Gregory, and I'm maybe not, full-time, players that are being put here. I did have, let's see if I have I still have it up, they're signing guys. They brought back F.A. Obade, right? But they've managed to sign some of these players who I think that they're looking. I mean, you got better on the offensive line, which I think is key. And I've talked about how the center of your line is super important. And you see this in a Dan Quinn defense where he's trying to line up with defensive tackles who are going to crunch that middle. And he understands that's what the NFL is trying to do. So he put in a starting center. He put in a left guard who you like and I think is more of a career backup. And we have a right guard. And so you're going to protect that aspect. So I think that there's those small victories happening right now that we won't necessarily see come to fruition. Washington still needs a lot to go. I know we talked about I think it's 38 is the number of new players that have been signed. Not all 38 are going to make the 53. If they do, that would be
crazy.
Unheard of.
Right.
Unheard of to see that level of turnover this much. Yeah, Kevin, beating bad teams. For the love of God, the Giants, please, right?
Those Giants last
year. How many times have we talked about playing down to our opponents? Washington's not a good team, but then when they go up against bad teams, they still find a way to be worse.
How did Tommy DeVito beat us last year? What's his name? Justin Fields had a career game against Washington on a Thursday night in Washington, I believe that was. Right, that Justin Fields game where he was just unstoppable, and he did all of that and couldn't get a second contract, couldn't get his 5th-year option picked up, got traded after what he did to Washington. But Washington's defense last year was not just bad; it was historically bad.
Very, very bad.
It was so bad, and they did get a lot of turnover in the defense. They brought in a bunch of guys. They drafted a bunch of guys. So I think the defense is going to be improved, but let's just not get carried away with this because it's all going to depend, of course, on Jaden Daniels and how he performs because he can, a really good quarterback can, sort of hide some of those blemishes that other quarterbacks can't. Sam Howell couldn't hide a lot of the blemishes. The year before that, Heineke and Wentz and so on and so forth. They weren't good enough to hide those things. Now, maybe they do have a quarterback that can hide some of their blemishes until they can shore those up in the future. But it's just kind of roster looking. It scares me a little bit in some of the holes. And of course, right tackle and left tackle are the biggest ones. And I know you don't like the safeties, basically with Forrest and Butler back there right now and Jeremy Chin, right? So if those are your safeties, that doesn't make you feel super great.
Yeah, I think safety position is going to be interesting. Chin replacing Curl. Chin was talking a lot about kind of playing a little bit more up in the box and linebacker. He's really looking at, and he signed here specifically because he wanted to be in a Dan Quinn offense or defense rather, because he sees the potential, especially on a 1-year deal. If he shines, a bigger paycheck coming. Defoe is a fan favorite. He's talked a lot about the culture changing. We found out from him that the ping pong table is back. But I do think that Defoe is, I don't necessarily put
Just
I don't put a lot into Defoe as far as long-term is concerned. I am a big fan, especially if they're going to play Sanistril in the slot, what they're going to do with, and why did I space on his name? 2nd round pick last year.
2nd round pick Mathis?
2nd round pick last year. Had an awful off season. Why did I just space on it? Somebody's going to put it.
Yeah, someone, I know. Guy from Illinois.
It's my brain literally stopped working. Martin
from Illinois.
Quan Martin. Yeah, there we go. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Brian. Quan Martin. I'm excited to see what he's going to do, and I think that we're going to start seeing him a lot more in safety over someone like Defoe or Butler, who is not panned out as a 4th round.
Yeah, where is he going to play if you have St. Juste and Forbes on the outside, and you have Sanistril in the slot, and you have Defoe and Chin and Butler as your 3 safeties? Where the heck is Quan Martin fit into all this?
Hot take. Maybe not that hot, but he replaces Defoe. I start Quan Martin over Defoe. If Chin's playing strong safety. Now, Quan Martin plays a little bit close to the line. He's kind of played all over. He has some fantastic speed and flashes. Percy Butler, I'm not even putting in the mix here. Percy Butler might just be ahead of Jeremy Reeves on the safety spot. And Jeremy Reeves makes the team because of special teams.
Okay.
So I don't put Percy Butler that high. I liked him 2 years ago when we drafted him, but I've not seen enough from him in the previous 2 seasons. I've seen the flashes from Quan Martin, who last season, his rookie year, mind you, he was actually one of the best rushers that we had as far as off the line, right? He has the timing down, and he had, I'm not dismissing the bad offseason or the bad start to the season, but when he came back and they kind of found that role for him, he shined, and I liked seeing that. So that is a good battle to watch. Is the safety room. I think wide receiver 3 is going to be another battle. I know you think Luke McCaffrey is going to take it. They did sign another wide receiver this off season when they picked up Zacchaeus.
Oh, Zacchaeus. Yeah.
That's somebody.
He's somebody.
Yeah. I mean, he had a decent season out in Philadelphia as the 3rd wide receiver. You know, you have Jameson Crowder. You're gone are the days of Mr. Steal Your Girl, right? Like, he's probably not going to make the roster this time.
What about Dyami?
Dyami Brown might be, honest to goodness, a practice squad or cut. And it's only because Luke McCaffrey is going to get a spot above him, or he's going to get a spot on the roster. Jamison Crowder is somebody who they re-signed. I think that they like, and they're going to at least keep around for a while. If they don't, it's going to happen early because he's a vet. And then it's just like, where do you put him? You just signed another wide receiver. So, and Zacchaeus, I'm going to butcher that man's name so many times. It's going to be fun. Zacchaeus. So I don't see a spot for Dyami Brown unless he's wide receiver 6 or 7.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm probably in that same boat. He really hasn't done much. After 3 years, he was a 3rd rounder. This is not some guy who was just maybe an undrafted free agent that they tried to develop. This is a guy who's a 3rd rounder, and you expect 3rd rounders to do something. He hasn't really done a whole lot. And I don't know if it's just bad quarterback play that he's had to deal with, because you remember that one game where he had 2 long touchdown passes from Carson Wentz. It was great, and you thought he was going to be somebody, but he really wasn't. So, yeah, I'm a little down on Dyami Brown, and I'm not sure he makes the squad this year either. I think they could probably take Zacchaeus over Dyami Brown just because of the experience that he has, that he's been around a little bit longer, and you probably have a little bit more money invested in him as well.
Yeah, he was somebody who, remember, I was so high on. I said he was going to be wide receiver 3 last year. I expected the breakout to happen.
Yeah.
And Curtis Samuel to kind of take a back seat, based off of what we had seen coming through. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Brian Butler, the tight end battle is one that he has an eye on. I don't think it's particularly interesting. To me, I mean, unless
it's not close or it's not interesting.
You have Zach Ertz, you have Ben Sinnott, and you have John Bates, and the rest are expendable.
Yeah,
that's how I line it up personally.
I'm not going to fight you on that.
I know we want to believe in Cole Turner, and there might be something there. I know you and I particularly love Armani Rogers. Back-to-back years with injury. You just took one at pick 53. I don't see Armani Rogers, maybe a practice squad spot. Cole Turner, I just think he's going to get cut. The reason why I would take John Bates is because of the blocking ability and because he might not be flashy as a receiver, but he knows how to get open. And he's shown that consistently where Cole Turner hasn't.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have it. That's my 1, 2, 3.
Okay. I'm probably in the same boat. I would like it to be different. I would like to see him. I would like to see Armani Rogers get a little bit more playing time. But we'll just kind of see how that happens. I like shoot, what's the dude kind of the fullback / tight end who
Oh,
played last year? I think
I
he's
had
still on the
the
roster. Let me look real quick.
You work on that one as I'm
No,
gonna
he's
move.
not on the roster.
He's not. What was the name? It was Arma.
Yeah, Alex Arma. I liked
Alex
him as well.
Arma was who you loved.
They have
Gregory at Tinsley, he's probably
awesome.
going to be a practice squad guy. You got to think that was, and I think anybody who was on the roster bubble last year, unless this particular coaching staff has an equal amount of love, they're going to have their own bubble, right? And their bubble was not going to be the same as the previous regime's bubble because they have their guys that they're bringing in. So that's one of those things that it's just like now, that's why if you're a De'Ami Brown, if you're a Tinsley, you need to be doing everything. These off-season voluntary workouts, you need to be there. Rookie OTA, if you get an invite who's not a rookie, because you can do that. If you're new to the team, you can get an invite. You need to be there and you need to be showing everything you can to this coaching staff of why you deserve one of their 53 roster spots.
How about this? How about this battle? How about the backup quarterback / third quarterback fight? They have 5 guys on their roster right now. And what's interesting, I mean, first of all, of course, you got Jaden Daniels, Marcus Mariota, Jake Fromm, Jeff Driscoll, and then Sam Hartman. The interesting thing about Sam Hartman, Nathan, is that he signed for an undrafted free agent, one of the biggest contracts that you'll ever see. He got a $225,000 base salary guarantee. That's more than our guy, what's his name, was making, right? Wasn't that more than Howell was making?
Howell was a 5th rounder. He was making a little bit more than that, I think.
Yeah, you're right. He was making almost $1 million. I was thinking he was making like 175,000 or something. But that's a lot of money.
It is.
I think they intend Sam Hartman to be QB3 on this team. Let Fromm go. Let Driscoll go.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of camp bodies. And I was surprised to see Sam Hartman not drafted, to be honest. Was this year broke the record for longest picks in between QBs.
Really?
It had exceeded 130 picks had went before Spencer Rattler was finally taken. So pick 12, and then it was all the way and pick 140 something that was finally broken with Spencer Rattler. And I think that spoke volumes to what teams were looking. By the way, Joe Milton went to the Patriots. So they did the thing that you wanted Washington to do, which was draft a QB, but they didn't have to. Sam Hartman fell, and that was a guy we even looked at. And I like aspects of his game. He's another older, experienced rookie when it comes to things. I do think he makes the roster, if only because not for the money issue, but because I think that they like him. They want to develop him. And if they put him on a practice squad, he will get sniped. I know we talk about that all the time. It's overplayed of like people being picked off our practice squad. It rarely happens. I know we have John Ridgway, who we took from a practice squad, but there's levels to that and what happens. But Sam Hartman is a developing QB that some team is going to be like, no, actually, because once QBs get injured, it's rare that a QB makes 17 games in a season. That's where we start seeing QBs kind of get shuffled around, and Sam Hartman's going to be somebody's, oh man, I was going to name off one of these Miami guys from a few years ago that, started late, but it doesn't matter.
Thompson, one of them was Thompson.
Skylar Thompson. Yeah, it's going to be one of these guys who's going to just get plucked just because they need a 4th QB at that point. They're down that far. Linebacker is a position I feel like Washington really improved. They did not pick up the 5th-year option for Ron's guy, Jamin Davis. What do you think about that and how that's going to play out with the linebacker room?
I like the linebacker room quite a bit. Obviously, way more than last year. You remember we went into the season with Jamin Davis and Cody Barton, right? as the linebackers with Mayo as a backup and Khalil Hudson as a backup. Now you go in with, depending on how they want to sort of set up their defense, you could potentially, if they run a 4-3, you could have Jamin Davis, Bobby Wagner, and Frankie Louvu. That's something that is a massive, massive improvement from last year. And they might not even run that sort of defense. They still may go with 2 linebackers, 1 line. We'll just kind of see how Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr. decide to do that. But they've got some playmakers now on that defense. I love Frankie Louvu. I think Jamin Davis is going to have a much better year than he has. And Bobby Wagner is Bobby Wagner. He's going to the Hall of Fame and was still very productive last year. So I do love the linebacker room where they're at right now. And it's going to be a huge improvement. We've just seen, which was ridiculous, the amount of neglect that went into the linebacker room from the previous regime. You're not seeing that anymore. It's not going to happen on Dan Quinn's watch.
Yeah, Gus Jamin has to make the Pro Bowl for me to consider bringing him back.
Yeah, they're probably not going to bring him back.
Yeah,
but
Grimjaw DQ says he always
year.
wants to find players' superpower. Maybe we use Davis as a pass rusher because of his speed. I do think that there's players who are going to get kind of unlocked and seen in this defense, and I'm looking forward to it. Let's stay on the defensive side of the ball. The cornerback room: Forbes, Benjamin St-Juste, your Mike Sanastrell. Who else is filling out that cornerback room now that we do not have Kendall Fuller?
Well, let's not forget about the guy they signed from the Chargers, Michael Davis. I mean, he was a very productive corner for them.
He goes on and off, like he has an on year and off year, an off year and on year type deal. This should be an on year.
Okay, this is the on year.
This is the on year.
Perfect. So that's a guy right now who should be considered for possibly a starter if you want to have Davis and Forbes or Davis and St-Juste. But I think from day one, Sanastrell should start in the slot as the nickel guy. But yeah, don't forget about Davis. So again, you have improvement. I just don't know what Davis is going to bring. I don't know if Forbes can kind of become that guy he was supposed to be, but again, much improved from last year. The defense overall is just much improved from last year, last couple years.
Well, they have really focused. You saw a lot of defensive signings. 5 of the 9 picks were on defense, which was a little surprising when you knew the offense was in such a pitiful state, but the defense also equally bad. Dan Quinn working with Adam Peters, kind of putting this into, position to kind of be the team that they want to see. We've talked about cornerback. We talked about linebacker, safety room. We've talked about the defensive line. How about this? The lack of a premier edge rusher.
Yeah.
I like the interior line. Think it's fantastic. I love crunching the middle of the field. Tom Brady was just a barely above average QB if you can take him out from the middle. And that says a lot. However, Washington's still lacking a playmaker on the outside of the defensive line after sending Chase Young and Montez Sweat. Not trying to call them, great playmakers, but they are better than what Washington had. Now, they did sign a few players on the outside. You have Dante Fowler, was more of a rotation guy, but Dorrance Armstrong as well. They're expecting to try to make that step up. What do you make of the edge before we get to any of the OTAs and camps?
Yeah, I think those guys, Armstrong and possibly Cleveland Farrell on the other side, are going to be the 2 starters. And then you've got some decent depth when you talk about Fowler, as you did, F.A. Obata. Of course, the guys that you drafted recently, KJ Henry and Andre Jones Jr. So again, you're right. Nothing sort of stands out from those edge guys, but they gave Dorrance Armstrong quite a bit of money. So they're going to expect something from him. They're going to expect him to kind of get away from his role playing that he did in Dallas and become that guy on the edge, on one of their edge positions. So I like it, but I think it's a little bit of a step down. And you're right. Sweat and Chase Young were not great, but they were productive for the most part when they were playing. And even Smith Williams and Tuhill were pretty good depth pieces while they were here. So I think this one's just a little bit of a step down, but we'll see what Armstrong does. It all kind of rides on him. Cleveland Farrell, I think he's probably just a journeyman, and don't expect too much from him.
He did play above Chase in San Francisco, so everybody loves pointing that one out.
Yeah.
Yes, Kevin, we have more first rounders on the edge, but those are first rounders we got just like we gave away Chase Young and Montez Sweat. So I wanted a more premier edge rusher. I'm good wherever the pass rush can go. So if it's Newton and Deron Payne and Allen feasting in the middle, and as TJ mentions, the edge is just containing, then love it. Absolutely love it. And Dan Quinn might be doing that. That was one of the things that I believe Micah Parsons on his podcast with CJ Stroud talked about how, Jalen Hurts was a guy who, Dan Quinn would be talking all week about how frustrated and how it kept him up at night and everything like this. Those running quarterbacks are something that Dan Quinn really kind of fears. One of the reasons why they have Jaden Daniels, and as DQ says, can just snatch the soul out of your defense. And I think that's why he wants the pass rush to come through the middle and your edge rushers just to set the edge to not let that running quarterback run free. So I think that there's going to be some tellings there as far as what that's going to go.
Now there's one position that I wanted to bring up that I wanted to reaffirm my hater status, and I don't like the Brandon McManus signing. He's Joey Sly 2.0. He's going to make
cut twice, by the way, in the same offseason.
But he's going to make more extra points, but he's going to miss more field goals than Joey Sly did. He is such a meh pickup at the kicker position, but he's not going to hurt you either. So, and the kickoff rules, I don't know how that's sort of going to affect, what style of kicker that you need until we see it sort of play out with these new kickoff rules. But he's not a guy with a big leg, so I don't know that that's going to matter in terms of the kickoff. He actually has a really good leg, but not in kickoff. So I didn't like that. I don't like the kicker move that they made.
Yeah, it's not exciting. I'm not a fan of either. One of the things that I noted was McManus not as good from deep. So Joey Sly has accuracy issues, but usually from deep, he can hit those. He has a much better leg. McManus, anything over 45 is going to be pretty dicey for Washington fans, and we'll have to kind of, hold the edge of our seat there.
Where do we stand today on if Tressway is going to give up number 5 to Jaden Daniels?
He's going to give up number 5.
He's not going to do it. He's not going to do it.
The only way Jaden Daniels doesn't end up with 5 is if he chooses a different number. Marcus Mariota having 0 is awful. That's just plain simple. The whole new rules, and somebody had mentioned this earlier, is the number system is totally out of whack.
Yeah.
Anybody can pretty much have any number outside of maybe a few specialty positions, and it's just going crazy now.
He's not giving up 5. Nathan.
Yeah.
He's not doing
and so I do think that maybe there needs to be a tier system here where, I know some people are like rookies shouldn't have their pick and they should have to earn their numbers and blah, 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 whatever. My thing is like, you shouldn't be taking a premier, like good number unless you were that player, right?
That's right.
We have a lot of people just like number retirements, right? We have a lot of people, by the way, congrats to Darryl Green for having his number retired this year. We have a lot of people who are taking premier numbers, Mariota with a 0. And it's just like, that you shouldn't be on that number. So I don't know. It's weird. Yeah. Grim job with that one. Horrible, crazy. But numbers aside, yes, Jaden Daniels taking 5 unless he doesn't want it.
Well, that's going to be the thing. He's going to be like, I didn't want that number. And everyone's going to be like, oh, Tress didn't give it up. That's why he didn't get 5. Hey, I don't know if Uptown Dre is still in here. But this is from way back at the beginning. And I keep forgetting about it. I haven't heard from Uptown Dre. I haven't gotten an email yet. He won the Sean Taylor jersey during our live stream of the draft last Thursday, but I haven't heard from him. Last Wednesday, we had somebody win a Terry McLaurin jersey. Matt Roll did, and he's already got his jersey. It's already been sent to him. He received it. He's already shouted us out everywhere. So if you're here, Uptown Dre, make sure that you send us an email, refthedistrict@gmail.com, and we'll get that out to you ASAP. Just want to get that.
And if you need to, also, you can hit us up on our Twitter account. We monitor that constantly. So @refthedistrict there. I'm actually going to look because I think I've seen Dre comment on some things on Twitter. So if that's the case, we'll try to reach out to you however we can to make sure that we get you that jersey because you want it. We're excited for you. We are going to have more kind of giveaways as they go. We're going to have some, more content coming. Commanders updates are coming back with rookie camp starting next week and OTAs after that. And then our mandatory camps coming. We're going to have all the content, more guests coming, more good things coming from here on Ref the District, but you need to do yourself a favor. You need to make sure that you're subscribed wherever you are listening to this. Like the video if you're here on YouTube, subscribe to our content because we're going to keep pushing out some good things. We're trying to line up a lot of good interviews. We know that you guys enjoyed that. Thanks again, Joe, for coming out tonight. And we'll be back probably on Monday with some more content as we gear up for some more things, maybe a player focus. If there's something you specifically want, make sure you let us know wherever you are listening so that way we can write that down and take that into account. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Starter. We're Ref the District here on the Believe Network, brought to you by Bet Online and Don't Sleep Energy. And until next time.
Yeah, just a throwback to the beginning. It is still malpractice that they did not get an offensive tackle.
Be a fan.